Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained?
Yeah. What's up, everybody? Welcome to week 2. I hope things are going good for you. I hope classes are going good. Hopefully you're staying safe. There's a frame above me. I'm playing around with OBS Studio, checking out different stuff I can do with it. And this frame above me, and I'll put this link in the video notes. This is from livemap.pingdom.com. This is Solar Winds that produces this. This is really cool. It shows a live map updating internet outages, so you can see like real time what's going on with the internet. Basically, the reason I like it, if you look over here on the right, what it's looking at is things like HTTP, hypertext transfer protocol timeout, that kind of stuff. Kind of cool. So really just me playing with OBS Studio for fun. So I've got a couple of different things that I want to cover tonight. More on object-oriented programming, reviewing the book some, and then case studies. One of the things I got for feedback was people were talking about, like, yeah, this and data structures are good, but how can I use them in real environments, and how do I really get use out of this? So one of the things that I did was look at an application I've worked on for years for a client. So it's a big application, has a lot of classes, has a lot of different projects in it. So it's a good example to look at. So we're going to look at that, check it out. And then I will look at a couple other examples of object-oriented programming in terms of sets of objects, some cool stuff in C# and Python. So that's like a general idea. The first thing I wanted to start with, of course, was the textbook. Again, the syllabus. There's a live online link. Excuse me. You can try to click on these links. Sometimes you have luck with that, sometimes you don't. If you search for the textbook and then click on it, this usually works most of the time. Let's go to our table of contents. So I kind of like the layout here. I think it's pretty cool. The general idea is the first 4 chapters cover a lot of the basics of object-oriented programming. These are the pieces that I was talking about last week. I just wanted to make sure that we covered everything from the book, and that you read everything in the book. I think it's important to actually read all the textbook. Take the time to do it. Chapter 1 goes into trying to understand what an object is. A set of parameters, methods that can operate with those parameters, and it does that with using calculations for like a square, rectangle, and circle, and looking at shapes. Shapes are objects that have attributes like height and width and area. And chapter 1 goes through that. So it's a nice, good example to look at. Simple code, simple stuff that you can open up in Visual Studio Code, copy and paste or rewrite. We did some of this before in class, of course, but just as a review, I think it's important to go through these chapters and do all these pieces. Read through each section, do some of the code that is shown here. There's the UML for describing the object, and in chapter 2, chapter shows implementations in C#, Python, and JavaScript, right? This is understanding making classes from constructors, destructors, to dispose of objects. Excuse me, and doing that in Python, C#, and JavaScript. So it's important to go through all those, do them in Visual Studio Code. Chapter 3 gets into encapsulation of data. This is the kind of thing I'd get into in the examples that we're going to look at later on, an example that I have from one of my clients. And encapsulation talks about where you're hiding data, right? And that it basically in terms of protecting it. So we want to protect certain data like the balance in an account. That's my classic example. I think that's one of the most important ones. Certain parts of memory, certain parts of objects in memory for the operating system, right? Like there's a part of memory that keeps track of. Here, let me show you an example. Let's look at our task manager and look at our resource monitor. So we've got a series of different executables that use parts of the CPU in terms of they have threads that interact with the CPU, use different parts of memory, keep track of processes in terms of search. There's yourphone.exe, that's an example I see there that if I connect a phone, Microsoft has some stuff to sync my phone with Windows 10. These are all different processes that use different parts of memory and use different threads in the CPU, right? So each one of these is going to have memory that it's going to control that Windows wants to make sure that it only has access to. So they're all kind of sandboxed on their own, similar to what you see in Task Manager. For most apps, like GitHub desktop.exe has its own memory space. It can only write to certain areas of memory inside its space. It's got multiple processes. It can do whatever it needs to do on its own, but it's isolated from other applications. Okay, so think of objects also in that way in terms of the operating system itself has objects for Google Chrome, GitHub Desktop, graphics, the graphics driver, the logical drives themselves, right? The C drive, the D drive, the E drive, and the physical drives underneath those, the SSD or SATA drives, that kind of thing, all are represented as objects. And we'll talk about that a bit more too in Python and networking in one of our examples. So, anyways, important to read through chapter 1, 2, 3, 4. 3 is encapsulation of data. 4 is inheritance and specialization. So this is where we get to our examples, like with the Griselda members, where we have a generic wrapper and then a specific kind of wrapper. So again, some of our case studies will get into this in more detail in terms of real-world examples. But the idea is classes are abstract representations of objects. You've got something like an animal. That's the most abstract one. You try to start with something like that. So if you think of things like checking accounts, banking accounts, those are my good go-to examples. Excuse me, everyone understands them. Every type of account is going to have a title, a name of some sort, right? This is a checking account for Jane Smith, right? That kind of thing. This is a mutual fund account for Jeremy, you know. There's some title that's associated with that account. There's some type that's associated with that account. There's some generics stuff that you can lay down at the beginning. So the idea is you've got abstract classes that you can start with at the beginning. An animal, regardless of whether it's a terrier dog or an elephant, is going to have some basics. And let's get those basics together and start from the ground up so that our classes are organized in that kind of hierarchy. So our memory space is organized in that hierarchy. We can protect sub elements when they have to be protected for just that kind of data. And then generic data like titles. Maybe a lot of people can read those. Maybe there's a lot of different objects that can read those, and maybe a lot of applications can. But peering into accounts, making transfers from accounts, changing who owns the accounts, who the contacts are on the accounts. These are highly elevated security attributes versus just the title of the account. So thinking about those things in terms of context for inheritance is really security is a lot of that. Excuse me, there's examples in the book in Python and C#, JavaScript, so make sure to check those out. Those first 4 chapters are really, when I think about OOP, the rest of the book has more detail about it in terms of how you can organize code in OOP, different kinds of generic types for object-oriented programming, and we'll come back to that later on, but getting those 4 first chapters down, those basics are the most important. So that is our first section, making sure to review all of our object-oriented programming stuff from the book. So then our next section is a case study, object-oriented case study, and this is an application called purchase orders. So let me see here. I have some screenshots of this app to give you an idea about it and to talk about it a little bit. So this application called Purchase Orders. This is an application that I have developed for a client, American Refining Group, as you can see here. These are just some generic screenshots from the application to show you a bit about it. There's a list of vendors and how you can manage them. This is an application that they use for managing purchase orders, different types of purchase orders, and it's a fairly complicated app. And it gets into the details of purchase orders and blanket orders and that kind of stuff. So I want to talk about this in a little bit of detail because this is what the application does, and this is something you'd see like if you look at SAP, large ERP application, right? SAP allows you to have different types of purchase orders. The application that I've built allows you to also do the same types of purchase orders as SAP does. As an example of supporting like enterprise level applications, really is the idea. So let's talk about this stuff in terms of this case study and how purchase orders work in businesses. So it's a lot different from when you just buy something, right? You use PayPal, Venmo, Cash App, Cash, etc., whatever. You initiate a transaction, buy something, it's over, right? You want a new laptop, you get it. It's done. Maybe you buy it on credit. So for you, it's not done. You're silly. You buy things on credit when you probably shouldn't, and you got to pay a lot of interest. That's no good. But either way, the transaction is completed at the beginning. You paid $800 for the laptop, whatever the total is, and the merchant got the money. You might play games with credit cards and your credit card company and so on. But that's, your however you do it. Either way, usually these are one-time transactions or one-time monthly transactions for a service, right? Like Disney Plus or Netflix or something like that. You're still just purchasing a product once a month. I'm buying a month worth of Netflix, that kind of thing. In businesses, in a lot of cases, a lot of things they have to purchase are raw materials that are necessary for that business to operate. So they don't want to play games like me and you might play games about buying laptops or streaming services in terms of all of a sudden the prices are higher or lower, etc. A lot of times we want to negotiate good prices ahead of time because we're going to buy a lot of stuff in bulk from you guys. And B, we need to make sure you're there so you can supply that to us. A company like American Refining Group is a good example of this because they have a lot of raw materials that they have to have, right? So the 4 types of purchase orders that they have to support and that are listed here, you could say, if you Google this kind of stuff, it's pretty much generic business for your business degree, your MBA type stuff to know. So there's standard purchase orders. These are called also spot POs. So standard purchase orders, excuse me, are something that we have to buy on the spot. So we go into work tomorrow. Let's say we have a factory and we make furniture at this factory. Okay. And one of the parts of making this furniture, there's multiple parts, right? We have wood, we've got cloth materials, we've got stuffing that goes over staples, glue, that kind of stuff, tags, that kind of stuff, to say if things are inspected and so on to get to our finished product. But there's probably some materials within the business that we just buy on the spot. Okay, so we might have like little printers that people have around their offices. Sometimes those are large copiers, but depending on the size of the business, they may have local printers they need printer ink for, little office supply type stuff. People use pens and paper and that kind of stuff. Some of that stuff you can get on blanket orders we'll talk about later, and you should negotiate pricing for almost everything ahead of time on a blanket order, so you don't have these kind of spot POs and pay retail prices. These spot POs and standard purchase orders, we want them to go away in a business typically, because that means you're paying probably a price that like I'm paying for something on the street, so to speak. What you want is planned purchases and blanket orders that negotiate better prices. But our spot POs still exist. There's always going to be emergency things. Something breaks that's unexpected. Little office supplies that we can't inventory very well. Stuff like that. Stuff that's not usually part of the core product that we can break down is part of the raw material costs of the product. Usually, in a business, you've got raw material costs that build up to some base cost for the product, and then some profit margin on top of that, right? Then you've got overhead costs of doing business, things like office people. You need accounting, HR, that kind of stuff. Those people, their salaries aren't directly applicable, right? So this is something like in MBA classes, you go over different ways of how you divide up this kind of stuff. Anyways, that's a lot easier to do on blanket purchases of raw materials. Standard purchase order is kind of a mess with any kind of data. So you have a standard purchase order. This is a spot PO. And you have planned purchase orders. This is something ahead of time. We know we're going to need a supply of this. So in our factory example, we're going to go through approximately 20 gallons of glue a day. So there's glue that we use to keep pieces together. There's staples and so on also in furniture, but maybe there's glue to keep pieces together. We have planned purchase orders, PPOs, for glue because we know our production just goes through it. We sell a lot of stuff. This is just one specific example, and we've got the past 3 years we've sold all this product via Amazon and Wayfair, and we know we're going to keep doing this. We've got contracts with third parties, etc. We know we're always going to go through these 20 gallons of glue every day. We're going to negotiate best price possible for glue, and probably put that in their planned purchase orders because that's really good. We want to get best possible price, make sure it's going to be here. Next option is a blanket purchase order. So a blanket purchase order is something that we can't just automatically have delivered to us necessarily all the time, but it's somewhere in that realm. It's more complicated. Maybe we need to buy large, like wood, large pieces of fabric, and these have to come on trucks that have to be scheduled. We can't just fire off an order. The glue, we can fire off an order for the glue, and FedEx just delivers these boxes of glue. That's a PPO. We don't have to think about it. The computer automatically does it. Blankets, though, somebody has to figure out what's going on. Somebody has to be there to make sure that we don't schedule 4 trucks to happen at the same time. That's an issue. There's only one person available in this example to unload the dock. So blanket POs have to be they're negotiated ahead of time to get as good pricing as possible, and sometimes there's market prices in there, but you try to get good prices. But those blanket purchase orders, somebody's going to probably have to go in and mess around with it. It usually is a contract for like a year. Let's say for wood, hey, we're going to need 4 trucks delivered a week of wood. We know that you can't always do that every day at 7 a.m. So you're going to have to coordinate with this person. We're going to have a blanket purchase order with you, maybe another wood supplier too in case something happens with you, or we just need to, depending on how that works. And those are under blankets. So those are other, again, materials that we can buy, typically, are under blanket purchase orders. The last one, these contracts, this is when we get into services, things that you'd have under a contract. So like, you have somebody who comes in and cleans your offices. Usually those are contract services, right? Like, we don't want to screw around every day to figure out who's going to come here and clean this place up every night. So we go and negotiate. There's businesses in town like here in Bradford. This furniture business would do the same thing. They'd find some local services business, come in, clean. They spend an hour cleaning every day. These guys, maybe they're $1,000 every 2 weeks. Not exactly sure, something like that. This contract PO is going to have details about that. Like, all right, you guys are going to clean. We're paying you $60 an hour to do it, or the person gets $15 an hour or $10 an hour, or you do the whole building, and that's $400 to do the building. Whatever those contract terms are, right? This is just like if you're purchasing a vehicle, right? You go in to purchase a vehicle, or anything that's like a larger purchase, a home, whatever. You're signing contracts, right? So you could buy this big piece of property and something could be wrong with it. I could buy a home, and then even though my inspection looked like it was good, maybe something fails in the house, later on, hot water tanks, electrical, things like that. Same with cars, right? Things can go wrong. There's a contract usually going on there, and those are under contract POs. So anyways, you've got this set of purchase orders you got to deal with. And the way we did it, we rolled out spot POs first, and then we did these other parts of these POs afterwards. But you would do something in that vein, and you end up with something that looks like this. Now, I'm not going to show you all the source code, of course, of what I did specifically for them, but we've got a library. This library has a bunch of classes in it. And then we've got purchasing.amref.com, that's a website. And so the website uses the library code. And the idea here is we have some separation like MVC for model view controller, right? We've talked about this before. I bring it up a lot because it's good to remember this in your head, to remember some kind of scheme in your head when you're thinking about programming. Okay, this is how I usually think about it. There's some model of whatever data, PO, there's different subtypes we have to deal with. And then there's views of that. In this case, there's a large website. I showed you 4 screenshots of it. There's probably 100 different screenshots I could show of different parts of this website. It's a ASP.NET C# website in the front end. But we could also have, and we do have other pieces like web services that access this also, right? So you can go into C# and make a web service. Let's see if we show an example that looks good. Empty web service. This is probably the general idea here is instead of accessing, this is good enough. This really is what it's about. It's really that easy. Our method, in this case, there's a subtract method. So that subtract method is like a method that we'd write normally, right? It has a signature. It accepts 2 variables, and returns a minus b. If we add web method to that, we can access that via the web. It turns into a web service. Okay. Then we can use something like jQuery to access that web service. These pieces, jQuery and web services, these are like the controllers in between. Okay. So there's some web service that's here. This would be what that C#. After this code is the C# that's on the web server. And then this is how I access it via some URL that goes to that method. So there's a method called greeting. It's going to return JSON, JavaScript object notation of whatever the service returns. And so this is the controller stuff in between the 2 parts that moves the data back and forth, brings it out for the view to show it to everybody. Okay, and then the view is the actual website itself. So in here, purchase orders library is the model, and purchasing.amref.com is the controllers and the views. We have some newer applications that break out controllers and have just web services separately, because that's really what you want in the long run. Is you want a view that's like JavaScript, something simple on the front end, HTML5, CSS, and some controller in the middle. That could be C#. It could be, in my opinion, C#, Java, Python. It could be COBOL for all with a web service on top of it. Really, there's no difference because your view is what people are using anyways. So, listen, if you've got COBOL code that works well, you can tie to a web service and let the web service handle, HTTPS and HTTP traffic and all that kind of stuff. Yes, why not? So, what my plan was to do is to make a new project and kind of go through like what I did to make the purchase orders application. So, when I make a new project, that makes a new solution, and the first thing I would start with is the class library. So I'm going to just call this PO class library. So this is going to be a new solution. This is going to be my class library. So this is where I'm going to put all of 5. Why not? the Universal Windows one. Nah. Are those my only options? Hold on a second. .NET Core, .NET Standard. Man, is this really necessary? Look at all this. Good God. Microsoft, you know, do we need, like, so there's .NET Standard, .NET Framework, and .NET Core, Legacy Portable, like, okay. So anyways, we're going to use a .NET Standard Framework PO class library. And it's complaining because of where I want to put it. Let's see if we do that. It's so silly though. I don't really think all those kinds are necessary. Like the .NET Core, the idea there is it's a lightweight version of .NET, but adding, I don't know, whatever. So we are going to start with a basic class called purchase order. So every purchase order is going to have a title. It's going to have a amount, which is, we're going to call this a grand total. It's going to have a total amount of tax, and we might have freight busted out as a total. That's probably a good idea. The line item total we can have as a function. So we'll have line items as a separate object anyway. So our purchase order is going to have a constructor where we have to give it title to start it, and then it'll be a public void purchase order. And so I know void purchase order, class purchase order. What am I doing wrong here? Yeah, boy, I'm losing it. Alright, sorry. So I have a public purchase order constructor. This has a title that's sent to it, and then we'll add all these line items afterwards as a separate object. And we're also going to have separate objects for a contract purchase order, and that's going to inherit purchase order, right? And then we're going to add also a blanket PO. Oops. It's also going to inherit purchase order, and then we're going to have a planned PO. So the idea here, first off, is that I know for sure that I need to make these objects, right? So this is the first thing I do, is I make some kind of a class library that has the objects started out. These are complaining because we haven't overridden and done our planned PO string title. Does this have to be? Let's see, public and PO. And do we have to write base like that? I believe that's right. Let's take a look and check. Let's look at our constructor and compare if I can find an example. Example. That's A, C, and get value. That one doesn't use a constructor. That's what we want to see. Class tank. Area of tank, inherits tank. Area of tank. Double area. And I don't do it neither. I need an example that shows inheritance with a child class string. Yep, there we go. So here's our example in our bottom example, our child class inherits the base and also sends message through. So same idea. And there we go. Alright, so our plan PO, all of our POs are going to require line items. So our line item is a public int, let's see, item amount. Oops, excuse me, public double item amount. There's going to be some amount for the item and then a public, I'm not sure, we'll start with this, public string UOM for unit of measure. So the idea here is we need to collect if they're buying in gallons or pounds or however that is that works. Typically, we'd go back and have a unit of measure object so they're consistent. Maybe we go back and do that afterwards, but we can make an enumeration of units of measure. That's another way we could do it. Something like this. And so we've got strings in here like LB, gal. What are some other common ones? Case. Some of those kind of suck. It depends. These you could list these a bunch of different ways. I guess a lot of this is case specific for units of measure, but we could do something like this. And then a line item has a unit of measure that way. Okay, so and then our other stuff, like it's got a title string. We probably have a part number that's specific for it. We might have a different vendor part number that we keep track of for it. We might even have an inventory part number. There might be different ways that when we purchase items, we align those back to inventory. So that might be copied over to this line item object from somewhere else when the user picks the purchase and puts the purchase order together. Let's see, what other stuff would we have in there? Unit measure, well, geez. I'm going to say a public double quantity. I'm iffy about that. But that's probably the right way, because we could be purchasing something in gallons and get 23.4 gallons of it, or 600.4 pounds of it. That kind of thing. So, and all our blanket, our generic purchase order. Here's one of the reasons why I went through and did this way. So I did it kind of fast, but you can of course pause the video and go back and watch it. But we've got we don't need this class 1. Let's kill this guy, and I'll check this all into GitHub when it's done too. But we've got a generic purchase order, and we've got hierarchy established. There's planned POs underneath that. There's blanket POs. There's contract POs. Okay, we've got to go through and finish them. They're complaining a little bit because we haven't specified our constructors. We can do that now so it doesn't complain. And again, this will all be checked in to GitHub. And I'll put that link in the notes afterwards too. So the idea is, now that we have this built, I can go back here and I can say that line item, I'm going to have an array of line items. And once I do this here, now this is available on all these different types. Okay, so even though we've only spent probably 5 minutes on these classes, we've already got 4 different types of POs that we can at least classify and have line items for. Now, obviously, a blanket PO is probably going to have some other object that would specify where the blanket items come from, right? There's more to do in here. Contracts. Our contract is probably going to have like a public double for like a contract rate. There might be line items underneath it instead, but we also might want to have a contract total saying we're going to buy unit measure. We're going to buy approximately 300,000 gallons of something from you guys. And that purchase does not exceed $250,000 or something like that. So we might have a rate, and that purchase is also by $60 per gallon, not to exceed $250,000 worth of purchasing, and we're buying that per gallon, that kind of thing. So that's stuff that we might have in a contract. A planned PO, we might have a public date time for sending date time and public date time for receiving date time. So this, we already have grand totals and stuff there. So yeah, this would be specific stuff for the planned PO. So there's probably more to this, like some planned PO schedule object too, but in general you'd have like some specific sending date times. So I'm going to make some PO objects for the future. One that's going to have a sending date time of 4/30/2020, one that has one for 5/30/2020, 6/30/2020, 7/30/2020. I'm going to have a planned PO object I generate for every month, and this will probably correspond to a row in a database, and it's going to have a sending date time for that month so that I can plan ahead and it automatically will send these out every month. So I don't have to manually go in and make a new PO every month when I know that I need to order glue or something like that. Again, some of those things might automatically be ordered. Some things, in a lot of cases, when businesses purchase, the main reason for all this is that planned POs or blanket POs or whatever, everybody needs a PO number. Okay, so the way this works is, most time businesses, when they're buying raw materials and stuff or anything, they could be purchasing something for $20,000, $50,000, $200,000. They're not going to automatically cut checks all the time or wire money or whatever. They might have a system where they give the vendor a purchase order number or the actual purchase order in a PDF or in some form or fashion. PDF is usually good because it's like, this is kind of like a final document. We want to buy this glue from you on 4/30/2020, and since here's a purchase order, it would have that title about what it is. We need this kind of glue for our furniture. It's a grand total of $45,000 for this purchase. $3,450 of that is tax, and $2,100 of that is freight. And then after that is the line items, which are the actual glue itself. So all that stuff is broken down and is sent to these vendors. And these vendors make the stuff, send you the stuff, sometimes without getting paid first. A lot of times without getting paid first. They just have a PO number. They know that since they have that PO number, they're going to be able to use that to get paid. That someone has issued that number to them. So that's key to getting payment. So it's important for a lot of people in how business goes. A lot of businesses depend on raw materials. They need to say, hey, vendor, use PO number 2020-030-30004. That's our PO number. Send us this raw material. We need it right now. And then we'll email them the PO. They'll cut us back an invoice number. So they send us back invoice number 2020-0401-003 for $29,000. And that invoice has our PO on it. So we match those back up together. So our purchase order after is going to have probably some kind of a public string invoice number, or maybe that is an array of strings, because this PO, this is where it gets all complicated. This is why you need the OOP stuff. So this PO might be a blanket purchase or a contract PO that goes on for a year, right? Or it might be a spot PO where we need to buy some nails and a hammer for some reason for $35, and that's it, it's done. Or this is a contract and we're going to purchase security services for $15,000 a month from you for a year. So you're going to provide those security services for $15,000 a month. And you're going to probably send me an invoice every month for $15,000. I might have one blanket PO for the whole year that you send those invoices under. Say, I'm using blanket PO number 2020-303-004. And then we have an array of 12 invoices that come in from you, one every month, for $15,000. And we keep track of that in our PO object so we know at the end of the year how much this came to, where'd that money go, here's the invoices, those match up with the checks that we caught or the direct deposits or whatever. So we can have a transactional security, transactional path that is closed. We close that loop in accounting. So we know, hey, this was supposed to be $180,000 or $190,000 worth of technology services or security services, and we paid $200,000 instead. How come we paid $200,000? What happened with those invoices? What went wrong in that process? So that's a big issue in businesses. Okay, keeping track of purchasing. In a lot of cases, your company needs raw materials. They need blanket purchases. They need all this stuff. And a lot of people have to buy it. Think of big companies like IBM or Boeing or something like that when they're trying to put together equipment. There's 50,000 different parts they need. They come from all these different vendors. It can be a pain. So anyways, this piece right here that we've worked on so far, let me make sure that I check this in. So this PO class library, let's open this folder here, and we're going to go to GitHub Desktop and make a new repository. And this is going to be called OOP Case Study Purchase Orders, an example of purchase order objects in C#, and it wants to initialize it in D. That's cool. And we're going to go show this in Explorer, and this is our library so far. Let me close it. So there's our PO class library. There's our new GitHub folder. We're going to move this over to here. And now our PO class library. Here's our first check-in. And like I said in the show notes, I'll have the link to GitHub so you can grab this. Alright, so that's the object part of this. So that's our first piece. And we're going to have to add some more. So the solution here, I made a mistake. This should be purchase orders example. And then PO class library is one under there. And then we could add another one. So we could add a new project. We could add ASP.NET web application. And this could be our PO web app. And we could use MVC, Windows Forms. I already have my model defined, so I'll use, instead of using their MVC template, I already did my own model myself, so I'll just do a web forms project. And that really should be it. So here's the advantage of what we can do here. This is the cool part. And we can add more. We've seen this a little bit in class, but just as a refresher. Whether this is a C# web app or console application, or done in jQuery or Vue.js, it's all really the same idea. Our PO web app is going to have a reference to our PO class library. Okay. So, in our PO web app, which comes with just some basic pages. Okay. We could add a new page. And we'll add a web form called add PO. And we would put a title, text box, button. So if we want to start a new PO, let's just bump this stuff up. Make it easy to see. So we have our title, and if we wanted to save our new PO, we could say, what do we call it? We have our PO class library, I think is what we call that. We have purchase orders, PO class library. Let's make this a public class so we can grab it. And we'll go through, make these guys public because we're going to access them from outside of here. Yeah, this might be because we might go to the line item level when we do something for the reporting process. So we want to make all these guys public. And then if we go back to here, our add PO, if we go here. So there, that's really what we're going for. Is now we've got a multi-tier application. It has a model. That's the PO class library project, and a PO web app. That's the controller/view. So I could say I want to make a new purchase order. Oops, I forgot. This is the other advantage of this. I forgot to just put in a spot PO or a standard PO. We have a standard PO. Inherits from purchase order. It's going to have a constructor, just like the other ones, right? And then our PO web app, we can say, we could inherit PO's class library up there, or, oops, I gotta rebuild it. So it sees that. Probably it's accessible, then contract PO. Measures. I don't know why it really cares. Okay. Clicking too fast. Let me give it a second. Alright, so btn add PO or save PO is what it should be called. And oh, I should have fixed that. It drives me nuts. So here it automatically made this. I don't like that. I want it to say the right name. And then we kill this guy. So then in here, sorry, do we not have our standard PL? I'm always in a hurry. You know what I mean? Why don't I just take my time? I'm like, I don't want to be bored trying to go too fast. I keep forgetting I have this cool map on top of me. So you just look at that, you know. Alright, so PO class library dot. This is nice because it keeps our stuff separated. Standard PO. New PO equals new standard standard PO. Then we can put in the title, and that title is going to be whatever is in our text box, which I didn't rename either because I'm in a big hurry. TXT title. Everything should be named right. And then here it's going to be txt.text. So that's the general idea. That's where we want to get to. That's basically all my purchase orders project does. It has a lot more, of course, in it, but that's the basis of it now. In this standard PO object, in here I would probably have some .save method that returns, actually saves it to the database, returns whether it's saved or not, something like that. And then in here, you know, I create the PO, and then I say if new PO dot save. If that returns true, then maybe I have some message on the screen. So again, this is the least sophisticated example in the world, but the idea is that it shows you PO status will show here. It gives you an example of how it could work in terms of a real world example. It's pretty close in functionality, and it's just building it out from there. Like our save method would not just return true, it would actually save, right? But it's about understanding that process where we've got this stuff, this is the controller. It says, well, if the save works, then we say the label status.text is your PO is saved. You know, it might probably would also say something like what their PO number is or something like that, right? And they'd be filling in more than just the title, right? But here we may have some error saving PO. if you're, in a business, you might literally do something like this, or have it linked to something in some kind of internal app, have a link to some internal app, that kind of thing. But this is your controller code. This is your view code. And this is your model code, right? Alright, so that is a case study on purchase orders. And the next one I wanted to show is not like as business useful, but it's kind of cool. So first, we're gonna say added view and controller, and commit this stuff. And once that is done, we're going to look at another example. So this is a cool application that I like to use. And I've had some people contact me online about this because I've been maintaining it. So let's see if I can. Oh, whoops. I thought I already opened this on here. My bad. It's complaining about NuGet packages that are missing. So we're going to restore those. And once we do that, I think we're good. So this is a theme. This is pretty sweet. I use this with like Tidal and Google Play, so I can download playlists and have them offline. So like get into J Electronica, use theme, can sign in to Tidal. Add that playlist and download that playlist so then I can listen to it. If my internet goes down, I have it locally, that kind of stuff. So pretty cool application. And there's multiple copies of this online. I've kept it up to date for Tidal so that it works, because Tidal offers FLAC downloads, nice high quality stuff. So this is going to be linked to in the video also, a theme. And a theme is similar to PO. I wanted to show it because it shows another example, and it's a more advanced example. There's a theme set of classes. This is all the stuff underneath the front end. This theme, this first project. This is all the stuff underneath the front end that is used to actually download the resources, like the album art, download the files as FLAC or MP3 or whatever. And then there's a plugin API that customizes that for whether it's Tidal, Google Play, that kind of different stuff. And then there's a unit test for testing whether it works or not. There's also WPF, Windows presentation framework version of the front end too. So it's pretty cool. There's a couple different things going on with it. The WPF, if you set that as startup project, I think that one works too. I haven't messed around with this one as much because WPF doesn't get used as much. Yeah, it looks kind of weird, but it does work. I played with it before, and I had to update it to keep it working. So I think this is super cool. There's a lot of cool stuff you can check out in here to see how this works and interacts with Google Play and Tidal. There's like a music service object. Okay, this is the base music service object. Whether it's Google Play, Tidal, or you could adopt it for other types. So basically what happens is when you run the application, it's pretty sweet. Very proud of this. I didn't develop the initial application, but I'm proud of the developer's work, and I'm glad that it gets used because it's super cool. When you paste a URL in here, it looks at the URL and figures out where it came from, which is super nice because then it keeps the user interface very simple. Whether it's Google Play title, again, you could adopt it for other stuff. It just takes the URL and figures it out. So that is converted to a base music service, but it's got to figure out that URL and say, all right, well, this is something I support, whether it's title, Google Play, or whatever. And then if it's title, it overrides how logging in works, how you access the files, how all that stuff works, creating albums, seeing the file types, the data types. Super cool. In addition to that inheritance of music service and title service, there's enumerations, like the enumeration I did for PO for quality. I like it. Again, it's not a business example, but it's something that everybody will understand too, and it's pretty cool. I think it's pretty cool. So that's the theme. I'll put a link to that also. Another thing I wanted to talk about, not directly related to this course, but there's a ton of free stuff that's available right now. And you know me, if I was in class with you guys right now, I'd be yapping on about all the free cool stuff that you could get. So there's going to be a list of links I'll put in the bottom of the YouTube video. I won't go through and click on them all in here and talk about them. You can, of course, check them out. I wanted to mention a couple of them. I think the first one under courses, this is 450 Ivy League courses you can take online for free right now. I suggest you find a couple of these, check them out. There's so much stuff that you can do. There's more specific links. I'm sorry, there's more specific articles that get into some more details about each one and that kind of thing. I just figured I'd put a group of them together and try to send you in that right direction. Harvard's they've worked on forever. When I did my MBA, I got a lot of cool stuff from Harvard and MIT. Check all that stuff out. Of course, the games too. GOG, Good Old Games, gave away a bunch of free ones. Epic always has free games every 2 weeks. So stuff to keep you entertained, that kind of thing. Be sure to check it out. I also put in the discussion board, there's another discussion board for other OOP case examples, or case studies, for you to check out. So I think that's about it for this week. Check out that kind of stuff, review from the book, and then next week I'll be doing a test. So since I'm doing the test, the video might be a little bit late. I'm not sure, maybe a little shorter. I'm not sure exactly if it'll make much of a difference, but it's not going to be a huge test. It'll be like 15 to 20 questions, multiple choice, true, false, just like all of our other stuff. Just based on what we've covered in these 2 videos, that kind of stuff. So check out the stuff for this week. Have a good week, and I will see you next time.